I'm inviting Frau Dorli Muhr to come to the stage. She fell in love in Blaufränkisch. You all know it's not easy, but once you do it, you are there forever. So your stage, please.
Sorry. Okay. When Guillaume invited me to do a presentation here, I was very flattered because I cannot show you a lot of scientific or technical experiences. And I thought maybe what I can show is kind of how I got introduced to the varietal and how I got an emotional relationship with it, because I think that this path that I took is maybe a pattern, both for consumers who start at zero, and and on the other side also for wine regions, which discover that they can make red wines, because every wine region that starts like that, everybody does the same mistakes. You talked about Cabernet and Merlot and so on. And so this was also in my past the same thing. And so I think this can give some information how it works. So let's see, which one? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So I was born in Carnuntum. That's the little tiny fillet in the east of Austria. And actually, I had very little appreciation for the wines of my region because it was so normal. You know how it is. You grow up in a wine region and you think, it's just a drink. It's a commodity. And I actually was infected with the wine virus during a bicycle tour through France. And it was less for the drink, but it was more an intellectual approach that I had, because I asked myself something that David has already introduced. I asked myself, how is it possible that one can taste in a glass of wine where and on which soil the plant has been growing maybe 5 or 10 years ago, on which the grape was flowering? So how can you taste that? What happens in the grape, in the barrel, in the bottle, so that you can smell and taste where it comes from? That was challenging me. And it's kind of the question of my life, because we still don't know. And so I have to go on studying. And well, then I studied and translated books of like Émile Pinault and so on, because I studied languages and I wanted to understand what is behind that terroir. So I still didn't find an answer. But then I was so in love with wine that I founded a PR agency. Nice, huh? It's called Wine and Partners. And because I wanted to teach the world what I found great, it's the beauty of the wine and the people of the wine, which are the best people in the world, and the regions of wine, which are the best regions in the world. So I started to work with many wine growers from all around the world, promoting their wines, being very passionate about what they did and what I did. And I learned about styles and regions, about climates and varietals, and more I wanted to make my own wine. So now we come to that what everybody does. Yeah. I said, a great wine, where can it grow? Only either in France or in Italy. So I went to France to search some vineyards that I could buy, but you know the French, they only sell you what they don't want. So there was nothing really great to get. So then I went to Italy, where I had several very good friends who helped me to find a place in the south of Tuscany. So it was kind of a new world place. The hill I bought in the early 90s was just covered with oak trees and sheep. And I thought, that's the second half of my life. I will live in Italy, best country, best culture, best food. And I will make my wine and will make a living of the wine. So I bought some land, did not plant it yet, of course. Then I went home, did some calculation. And in year 15 of my calculations, there was still no profit. I said, something's going wrong here. Nowadays, I know that it was right. So I did not plant yet. I said, I have to go on with my calculations. So I just owned the land. Yeah, but then destiny had a different plan for me. And I moved to Portugal. You maybe know the story. And I lived in the Douro, which was a short but very important experience in my life. I added 2 new elements in my wine knowledge. 2 elements that before, like in the Austrian community, I would not really have realized. One was, there is nothing better than old wines. But this was really new, because in Austria there was no vineyard older than 30 years. Old wines. And the second thing, which also was not very common in Austria, was there is nothing more attractive in wine than freshness. Because here, in that region where you have 40 to 50 grades in summer and very little rainfall, and so it is not a talent to get mature grapes. It's a talent to have like a port with freshness, with acidity. Okay, old wines and freshness. So this new knowledge told me that my South Tuscan history is already over, because if I start planting wines in the age of like 38, I will never see how it is when they become old. So I had to reinvent my own life, and I said, where can I go? Where can I make wine where I get like old vineyards and where I can get freshness? And imagine what happened. I came back to the place where I was born, in Könontom. So the Spitzerberg is the easternmost hillside of Austria and the westernmost part of the Carpathians. My grandmother, who used to live there the first 18 years of her life, she got at her wedding, she got a present of 0.17 hectares of a vineyard there, and my family kept on working it. It was a very melancholic place for me. It has been digged out, though, in the 70s, so it was just a relict. But I had a very good emotional feeling about that place. So with my then future and now ex-husband, I started to make some wine there in 2002, and it was terrible. But I got this another vineyard that I rented then, and later on I replanted also that one of my grandmother. And I got a vineyard with Blaufränkisch vines that were planted in 1965. It's about my age, so very young. And I thought it was good. I liked it. So 2003, we were already starting earlier, doing the right things. But actually, we were not sure whether Blaufränkisch really was the best varietal that we could produce on the Spitzerberg. What did we do? We did what everybody does who starts making red wine. We planted some Merlot, we planted some Cabernet Franc, some Petit Verdot, some Tempranillo, some Malbec, some Syrah. I think that's all. And wanted to find out what happens. And maybe there is something that is even much more better than Blaufränkisch, and we just didn't know it, or the people just didn't know it. But why did we plant those varietals? Look, I'm not sure whether you can see that from behind. This is the temperatures. The green one, the green line is Tuscany, the blue line is Bordeaux, and the pink line is Könontom. So you see, we're getting quite hot in summer, but we are quite cold in winter. And maybe the most important thing is that like from mid of August, we are getting really cold nights. So this is why the average temperature goes down rapidly. And now something. So this is, it shows actually that from the varietals, we could really go to the same places as where I wanted to buy vineyards in Tuscany and Bordeaux. But now, this is the rainfall. So this shows we are in continental climate. It's very different from regions that are close to the sea. We have the most rainfall normally now, but we're still waiting this year. We have only between 280 in very dry years and 400 millimeters of rainfall in the Spitzberg. A year, not in January, in a year. And this rainfall usually is concentrated between like mid of May and beginning of July. Then we have big, big rainfalls, far too much in one day that the soil could keep, and very often with thunderstorms. Happily, we don't have hails, but I think it just happened in Burgenland again, in the South Burgenland. So we usually don't have hail, but we have very heavy rainfalls that in the old time would make a lot of erosion as well and have changed the terroir a lot. But from beginning of July till the end of the year, it's getting drier and drier and drier and drier. And that compared with the cold nights from August on makes it really a good place for late ripening grapes, if you want some freshness, remember. And yeah, you can wait, because even if we have a big rain, usually it gets drier later on. I'm not sure whether you know about the Hagelin index or whether you call it Huglin. You know, yes? So we are at about 2,000 and getting higher and higher. So it's really something that is perfect for Cabernet or Syrah in our temperatures, yeah? So this is why I think what we did, our plantings was quite correct, and the grapes mature very nicely. We see beautiful results, for example, with Syrah in the last years. But with all the fantastic grapes that we have planted and all the nice results that we have, we definitely saw that Blaufränkisch always gave the best results, because you know what I was looking for is a wine that reflects where it has been growing. And Blaufränkisch does it much better than all the other varietals that we have. Maybe you can't see very well that picture, but I have some maps with me. If you are interested later on, I can show you. So this is again Carnuntum. And how can I make light? Is there any pointer? No. Anyhow, you can see it. So, is it now here? Oh, there is a mouse. But it's not me. It's another mouse. Anyhow, this is the region of Carnuntum, and the interesting thing is that, I think we can see it on a later map as well. Here we have two mountain chains that start or end in Carnuntum. On the eastern-western part of Carnuntum, it's where the Alps start, so the Leiterberg hillside. And in the northeastern part of Carnuntum, it's where the Carpathian starts. So it is really two mountain chains, I would say, that start in Carnuntum. It's not where they end, but where they start. And those two, and there is a corridor of about 30 kilometers between those two. And this corridor is a perfect tunnel for wind. This is the wind in Carnuntum, actually in this corridor. to the left is the Alps, to the right is the Carpathians, and in the middle you always have wind. I can't do barbecue, otherwise the village would not exist anymore. Everything would burn down. It's very dry and very windy. So we have either wind coming from east, southeast, most of the time. Those wind comes up, goes then into the Danube Valley and prevents the rains from the Atlantic to come down to us. This is why it's so dry. And sometimes we also have wind from north, south, west, and this usually brings rain, but only a little bit. So many things going on. Okay, this is a little bit better, showing how Carnuntum looks like. So in the you see the Danube, that's the blue thing, and Vienna is the western border of Carnuntum, and Bratislava is kind of the eastern border, and the Carnuntum is the region south of the Danube and north of the Leiter, which is the border to Burgenland, even though everybody puts Carnuntum into Burgenland via Lower Austria. So you see again the Alps, Leiterberg, starting in the southwest, and also building a border to the Lake Neusel, which is on the bottom of the picture. So we don't have any influence of Lake Neusel. I would say that most of the regions in Burgenland, at least in the north, have influence from the lake. That means it is moderating a little bit the temperature, and I think more importantly even, it always has some humidity in the air. So this is why I think the wines in Burgenland, in Blaufränkisch in Burgenland, always have a little bit more humidity available to mature in a more regular way, or to produce maybe a little bit more sugar by photosynthesis. On the Spitzberg, which is the beautiful tiny fillet that you can see in the red circle, we don't have humidity in the air because we have this wind coming all the time. So you can imagine that in the very old times, like more than 20 million years ago, Alps and Carpathians were one mountain chain. The link broke down 20 million years ago, they say, I don't know. And everything was filled with sea, of course. So the Spitzberg was kind of the beach, you know, this is why we have sandy limestone there nowadays, like at the beach. And later on, when also the sea went away, we had the Danube flowing through that corridor. Nowadays it goes from west to east, but then it went from north to south through that corridor. And it brought and left a big amount of gravel. So in the lower parts of this corridor, you find a lot of gravel. And then on the Spitzberg and on higher, on the eastern part, you find limestone. While the more western part of Carnuntum, it used to be at that time a region of tiny lakes, so that are slowly, over the millions of years, kind of dried out, and what we have there is a lot of sediment soil. So Carnuntum is a tiny region. We only have like 900 hectares of vineyards, but we have a big diversity of soils. So in the western part, where you have more the sediment soils, the soils can keep humidity, a little bit of what we have in terms of rain. So there you find different varietals, while in the eastern part, with that limestone that does not keep any rain, you can only plant varietals that can really go with very dry conditions. So this is maybe one of the reasons why in the western part of Carnuntum you find much more Zweigelt, but you also find Merlot, you find Grüner Veltliner, and so on. And in the eastern part of Carnuntum you find Blaufränkisch and Blaufränkisch and Blaufränkisch and Blaufränkisch. So this is currently, this has been taken, that was the situation in Carnuntum in 2018, end of 18. So you see about 55% of our production is red wine, and more than a quarter of everything is Zweigelt. So Zweigelt is very famous for Carnuntum, or Carnuntum is very famous for Zweigelt, and Blaufränkisch is only 11%. And so when I started making wine there, and I was so in love with Blaufränkisch, everybody was like, okay. So when we did a big tasting of Carnuntum wines, and I had my big neighbors like Markovic and Netzel and Glatzer, and they had fantastic Zweigelt wines. And then the consumers came to my table, they said like, oh, what happened with your wine? I said, it's really, I want it like that. Ah, okay, thank you. And I went on. So it is what happens everywhere, so this is why we have to fight for Blaufränkisch. So, we knew, I understood that Blaufränkisch is the best what we can have on the Spitzerberg. So now how can we vinify it? What can we do with those wonderful grapes to bring the best expression of Spitzerberg? And something that David has mentioned before already, I think it is really important to work together and to discuss and to exchange and to regroup producers all the time and to work together. I strongly believe in associations, in cooperation, in exchange, and in growing together. And I do not believe at all in the thinking of, I do everything better than the others are really stupid, I go my own way because they are too bad to go with me. This is not the way, and we really have to engage ourselves if we have passion for something, to bring others into that boat as well and to do the work together. So when I started working on Spitzerberg and I realized that this is so a special place and so distinctive and so fantastic, I said, we have to do that together because it's a work of appellation. It's not a work of a brand. It's really a work of appellation. So I did a meeting with all the owners of vineyards in Prellenkirchen. So it was like 60 men older than 75 and me. And I tried to explain them what an appellation is and that we have to protect the appellation, that we have to put Spitzerberg on the label because nobody did. And that we have to find our style, how to express that wonderful. And they didn't understand me until I said, look, if you really work together and you try to protect your appellation, then you can earn more money with it. And they said, oh, really? How comes? And I said, yeah, look, for example, how they do it in Burgundy, or look how they do it in Champagne. They don't get 30 cents for a kilo of grapes, but they get 30 euros for a kilo of grapes. And they said, now you are talking. So we tried to find a way how grape producers could earn more money and what they should do and what they should look on, because until then they just sold their grapes for very little money and they tried to have a maximum yield to get a little bit more money, and it was all a nightmare. The vineyards were looking terrible. But what I also did, I created a group of producers that were seriously working, and they had some vision where we could go, and we sat down together several times per year, and we did blind tastings of our wine and of our wines, and we tried to find out what have you been doing, what is better, what do you think, what makes the wines more distinctive from other places. And what we also did, I hope you don't sleep, I'll be finished soon, we invited the most famous Blaufränkisch growers from other regions, so from South Burgenland with Uwe of Schiefer and Christoph Wachter, and of course Roland Wehlich and the Treebaumers and Heinrich and everybody. We sat down together, we did blind tastings, and we said, what do you think, what is the niche for Spitzerberg to be very different from all the other places? Because what we have seen is that Blaufränkisch really reflects its soils and the place where it comes from. So we have to stick to that and we don't want to copy anybody. So we are already at the place that we don't want to copy Bordeaux, but now we don't want to copy Mittelburgenland, or we don't want to copy Rust, or we don't want to copy Eisenberg. So we worked together and we tried to find out what is the best way to do. So we experimented different things. We experimented like destemming or not, hand destemming, machine destemming, different macerations, different fermentations. We did foot stomping, as you can see, and what we do now is really we do hand pushing. We don't use any machines, any pumps. We make sure that everything is very, very soft. And what we have discovered is, now you wonder, that Blaufränkisch expresses itself the best, the less we interfere. So the less we do, the more exciting is the wine. I think Blaufränkisch does not like to be forced into a direction. It is a free spirit. So, in my opinion, Blaufränkisch is an Aquarius, if we talk about zodiac signs. If it must accept frames, it falls into depression and loses its talents. Blaufränkisch, like all Aquarians, and I know what I'm talking about, believe in liberty and in individuality. So, this is the Spitzerberg. As I said, I have better maps than there. And in the beginning, as I was so excited by old wines, what I did really is selecting my grapes by the age of vines. In the beginning, it was easy because I had only one vineyard, but then it was growing and growing. Now I work, the whole Spitzerberg has about 90 hectares of vineyards, of which I work on 12 hectares, of which 11 hectares are Blaufränkisch, and those are divided into 36 vineyard plots. So I really have a nice choice of what I can do, and as I said in the beginning, I just selected them by the age. The youngest wines go into the regional wine, the middle-aged wines go into the village wine, and the oldest vineyards go into the single vineyard wine called Spitzerberg. And one day we had this new requirement by the administration, by law, that we have to define what are the limits of each vineyard in Austria. It's called the famous Riedenabgrenzung. So we all sat together, we already knew who the people who are serious on Spitzerberg, and we said, okay, now let's define what is Spitzerberg. And then I got a call from the administration that said, actually, Spitzerberg does not exist in the list of vineyards. It's a geographical appellation, but it's not a wine appellation. Oh, interesting, but what is then the names of the appellation? And they gave us like 12 or 14 different vineyard designations. So Spitzerberg did not exist. And we looked at that list and said, what's that? I've never seen that. And nobody uses it. We don't use it. We just delete that and we call everything Spitzerberg. And so I felt a little bit bad about it, but still, really, I have never heard about these names before. So I went back to my cellar. And you see I have a concrete soil, and there I took the samples from the different vineyards that we had, and it was for the first time in my life that I really regrouped the wines after the names of the sub-vineyards, not by age. And this was mind-blowing, because it was really so different, and it's really just 100 meters one from the other, but it was a completely different expression. Whether they were old or young wines, there was a common expression of those sub-vineyards. So I just called my colleagues and said, stop, 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 don't send the new map to the authorities. We have to rethink everything. So then everybody came with their samples, are divided by sub-vineyards, and it was really a big aha, because nobody has been thinking about that before. Also because most of the growers only had like 1 or 2 vineyards, so there was not really a possibility to compare. But this was so mind-blowing, and it was a great moment. So since then, I was fighting for the permission to label my wines both with the name Spitzerberg and the sub-vineyard. But the authorities said no. That's too confusing. 2 appellations on 1 label, Okay, look, we have Austria on it, we have Carnuntum on it, we have Prellenkirchen on it, which is the village, and I have 1 vineyard. Maybe I can put the second name as well? No. Okay, So we kept on fighting, we invited all the important people, we drank and tasted, and it didn't really work until they found out that at the moment where we had to send in the appellation names, we had already put both and said, yeah, it's already in the law, you can use it. So now we can do it. And it is actually in 2019, so the current vintage that I'm doing a launch now, that we have both on the label. Just want to show you, for example, this is Obere Roterd, above the street. And this is one of my favorite places, maybe because it was one of the vineyards of my grandmother. But it's so different from, for example, this one. Okay, it's also a different season. This is autumn. But this is like, it's called Obere Spitzer, and it's the most western part, to meet the finest of everything. And I went through those vineyards together with our friend Maria Heinrich, the world-famous geologist, and I said, explain me, please, why is it different? And she did her tests, and she said, from mineral side, it's all the same. It's all limestone, degenerated dolomite, it's all the same. But you know what is the difference? She said, I think it's the size of the grain. Because in the eastern part of Spitzberg, there has been more degeneration already, and the grain is a little bit tinier, so the soil can keep a little bit more of humidity. And the more you go west, it is larger, and so the water just goes through, and the soil does not keep humidity. So this kind of confirmed to me a little bit that, let's say, terroir, in my personal experience, is of course has to do with the soil, but in my opinion it has mostly to do with the fact when and how much water is available for the vine, because then it has a different cycle of its life in that moment, and it has to fight maybe a little bit more or a little bit less, and this makes the difference in my opinion, but of course I have no idea of anything. So now you see, no, I have to show you here. So this is Ried Spitzberg, Obere Spitzer, Kobeln, and Obere Roterd. I have here and here and here, yeah, and Kranzen. So now we have 4 labels, and it's really, you see, we really want to make the life a little bit more complicated. We have 4 wines that at the first moment look identical, but they have a tiny notion of the parcel on the bottom. And maybe it's really confusing, but I love it. So now I have to see on which I have to go on here. Yeah, this is just to end, because I'm very proud of this. I have shown you that distribution of grapes in Carnuntum from 2018, where we had 28% of Zweigelt and 11% of Blaufränkisch. And I've just done a survey with the Carnuntum producers in the last 3 days and said, write me immediately, have you planted any new vineyards in the last 3 years? And if yes, which varietals and what is the surface? And you see, Blaufränkisch, everybody has been laughing on what is that, what are you doing here? You see, Blaufränkisch has been planted, nearly a third of all the vineyards have been planted with Blaufränkisch, and Zweigelt is still there, and the white wines are still there, and some other as well, but Blaufränkisch is the winner, and I think for a reason. Thank you for your attention. If you want to know more, or if you want to get in contact with my passion, my big love, please come and visit me. I'm very happy to show you all my vineyards, because I'm so proud that eventually we found together Blaufränkisch and me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorli, for this beautiful love story. Sometimes people need to go around the world to find the treasure at home, but it's hard to dig it sometimes, yeah. Okay, maybe there is a question for Dorli at the moment. Yes, please. And you can share the mic.
Yeah, so, you know, There's a saying about if you have a carpenter has a hammer, everything he sees is a nail. So Maria Heinrich, of course, a wonderful wine expert for sure, but she's a geologist, so she sees everything as rocks. So I mean, her comments about granularity of soil fit the typical account of geologists. Is it's all about the water management. It's sort of hard for those of us who are used to tasting the differences in character for whether it's Blaufränkisch or Pinot Noir or Riesling. It's kind of hard for us to wrap our heads around that. I would think, not being a scientist, that the missing link is, and perhaps more important, is the microbial life and the fungal life and the, what is promoted in the soil. So have you done any research or work to try to determine the differences from one site to another? Because that would seem to me the more obvious means of mediating flavor rather than just the water management per se.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure you are right. No, we have not done any scientific things because, as you know, I'm struggled between all the things that I do, and it's. But we have converted all the vineyards to organic since 2015, and I think we made big progress in even more distinctiveness of the sub-vineyards. I would say this is exactly what you are asking. Yeah, I can't prove it. I just can taste it.
Okay, thank you, David and Dorli for this.